All right, thank you. Okay, so just another couple of minutes before we start. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Then again, with this meditation session, the first part focusing on the breath, and the second part, going to do meditation based on the teaching on the verses that Geshe covered last Thursday, last teaching he gave. So just to sit in a comfortable position, position which is conducive for the mind being both relaxed and focused. And here we can generate positive motivation. In this first part of the session, the breathing meditation, that if we're able to put in some effort, skillful effort, to keep the mind focused on the breath during this first part of the session, then it can create the best kind of mind state to engage in the meditation session, main body of the meditation session, which in turn then can be very helpful if we cultivate the right state of mind to influence our mind in a positive way for the teaching session and tutorial session, discussion group this afternoon. So then once again, if you have your own method that you use to focus the mind, then to apply that method to bring the mind into the present moment as best as possible, not being drawn away into the past or into the future, not being distracted in other ways by sounds, sensations in the body, etc. But as best as possible to remain right here in the present moment. And one method that can be used is to observe the breath coming in and out, flowing at its natural rate, focusing on the sensation of the air coming in through the nostrils and passing out. Keeping that focus while at the same time being vigilant about the arisal of distractions in the form of thoughts and so on, sounds, etc. As these arise, just to note them, awareness of their arisal, but not to get caught up in the story, because our business here our business is, as best as possible, to continually bring the mind back to the breath. So then continuing in this way for the first part of the meditation session. And just remembering to continually bring the mind back to the breath. So then the main body of the meditation, focusing on these two verses from chapter 2, Geshe covered on Thursday, verse 55 and 56, seems very important verses. I don't know if it's right to say some are more important than others, but the emphasis placed here on that understanding that the world's problems arise from out of the afflictions, and that the medicine for treating these, the Dharma, is extremely rare. So implicit in this is our responsibility as Buddhists who have connection with the medicine, with the Dharma, our responsibility to bring sanity to the world. So starting at verse 55, if all the people dwelling in Jambavitpa, that's this world system, can be crushed by just one of these, the afflictions, and if no other medicine to cure them is to be found in all the directions, the Dharma, then the intention not to act in accordance with the words that can uproot every misery of the all-knowing physician, the Buddha, is extremely bewildered and object of scorn. So very much looking at ourselves, our personal responsibility as Buddhists, as inner beings, that we've been able to identify the cause of the world's problems as arising out of the afflictions, the root affliction, ignorance, and then the other ones that arise once you have ignorance, the attachment, anger, jealousy, arrogance, pride. And so on. Then it's contingent upon us. We have the responsibility to apply ourselves to bring about changes in our mind so that we can be a positive influence in the world, so that we then also sustain the Buddha Dharma. If we live according to the Buddha Dharma, then we're allowing the Buddha Dharma to survive in dark time. And Geshe made mention last week, actually on that day, in his commentary, referring to the First World War and the Second World War, and how these arose out of the afflictions of attachment and pride and anger, and then also the activities of dictators and the capacity of one person to bring about, to be a strong influence and bring about the killing of millions of people, of millions of beings, not just people, but also, as Lama Zopa says, it's not just the human beings who die in these conflicts, it's the animals as well. How many horses died in the First World War? So it all originates from out of the mind. So we can read history books about and give an explanation of the origin of the First World War, an origin of the Second World War. And what they say there may not be untrue, but really the root cause of it comes from the afflictions. Well, the root cause is the affliction. So we can only have to look at the words. and the thinking of the Nazis to see this. And so, in anticipation of the invasion of Russia, where the Nazis referred to it as a war of annihilation, because the Russians were subhumans, inferior beings, then they engaged in propaganda and said that according to science and according to nature, the strong should destroy the weak. And so they showed that in terms of more powerful insects killing less powerful insects, in terms of nature. And then in terms of science, they invoked the name of Charles Darwin, who was actually a compassionate person. This idea of survival of the fittest. It was only right and natural that they, the Nazis, had the right, the superior beings, the Aryan being, had the right to kill inferior beings. And that thinking was conveyed to the soldiers. And it made it all right, not just to kill, but to be extremely brutal in their invasion. So you can see how afflictions strengthen, not only afflictions are there, but they strengthen them. And Adolf Hitler said, compassion is a sign of weakness, and it is an affliction, a delusion, an aberration. And through propaganda, again, conveyed that thinking to the population. So really think about that. While thinking about that, imagine that type of thinking takes hold in society. It's communicated through the education system that compassion is a sign of weakness. And it is an aberration. In fact, of course, compassion is a sign of strength because it means you're secure and strong within yourself that you can afford to use your life to benefit others. You can sacrifice your life to benefit others because you feel strength within yourself to be able to do that. So we have a responsibility to be vigilant about the arisal of these mistaken understandings within our society. And no matter what happens, that we maintain the view that holds that the afflictions, the disturbing states of mind, those states of mind arising out of ignorance are the source of the world's problems, not other beings. Rather, the afflictions in our mind and the minds of others are the source of the world's problems. And as it says in there, 8 verse of thought transformation, the moment an affliction arises in my mind, may I confront and avert it without delay. We have that responsibility. We have a responsibility for that because we see the forces of negativity in this world. In politics, where it gets to the point politicians will lie, we know that. But it gets to a really degenerated point where politicians not only lie, but they have no sense of shame about it. Doesn't mean anything any longer to be dishonest. To be caught out even lying is not a problem for them. So in Mahayana Buddhist teachings, they talk about 3 levels of ethics. Ethics of non-harmfulness, ethics of doing virtue, and ethics of benefiting others. But then there's a more foundational ethics, the ethics of inner development, of abandoning the afflictions. That is our ethical responsibility, to work against the afflictions. And so this is very important really when we see the various problems existing in the world, the social problems, the protests and the anger, so on, all the injustices which occur in the world. For us as Buddhists, that we maintain that stable understanding of living this ethical foundation, this inner ethical foundation of abandoning the afflictions. Because it's from these that the world's problems arise. Even those in the peace marches, the marches for peace, then very difficult to bring about that result if the mind is conditioned by anger. Because anger is a mind wanting to harm. It's an affliction. Then also last Thursday, Geshe-la made the point, although we may be very much involved in Buddhism and may be involved in Buddhism for a very long time, and may be ordained, maybe even teaching, whatever, Still, it doesn't necessarily mean that our conduct is in accord with the Dharma. And so it may be the case that we still tend to see when we have conflict with others that they are the source of the problem. We never look into ourselves to see how we're contributing to this conflict or this disharmony that may be occurring in the Buddhist center. So then in relation to these afflictions, their arisal doesn't arise independently, it arises in dependence upon different factors. For instance, to sense how they arise, what are the causes for them? Then for afflictions to arise, firstly there has to be a seed existing in the mind. If there isn't a potency for that affliction to exist in the mind, then that state of mind can't arise. No matter how difficult another person is, how obnoxious they are to us, if we don't have the seed for anger within our mind, anger will not arise. So we've had beginningless ignorance. And with this, then, when things don't go our way, anger arises and we've created the habit. So we have the seed for anger to arise. So we want to know why it is that we have certain predispositions to maybe get angry or be jealous or very strongly attached. Where does this come from? Has it come from our parents? Or is it associated with our mind stream? If we understand this, then we can have more understanding and kindness towards ourselves and understand that this is part of mental disease. That which we need to heal within ourselves. That is our business as Buddhists, to heal ourselves of this mental disease of the afflictions. Then also for the affliction to arise, it requires an object. For strong attachment to arise, then the object needs to appear. Then strong sexual attraction, it may be then the person appears to you in the form, but even at that stage, it's a concept of that person. Arises on the basis of this object. It may be an image in the mind, a memory of something someone said to you which you really made you angry. So it might be 10 years ago and appears in the mind again. The object appears. And then the anger arises. So we understand a little more how our afflictions arise. It may be wise then in certain circumstances to separate ourselves away from the objects which lead to the arisal of the afflictions. It may be wise to go for a period of time into retreat, to separate yourself away from those things which stimulate the afflictions. Then also what leads to the rise of the afflictions are the media, newspapers, TV, so on, these things which can stimulate these afflictions of both attachment, anger, jealousy, all these things, pride, basis of what we experience. And then also the company we keep. We may need to make decisions, establish personal values in the life. What's most important is inner development. And if we maintain contact, very strong contacts, not to say you don't still see the people, but if as a result of being with those people, there's a degeneration in your listening, thinking, meditating on the Dharma, and degeneration in wisdom and compassion, and the activation of the afflictions, then maybe it's necessary to reappraise the relationship you have with them. And then there's inappropriate attention. If you continually ruminate over something someone said to you, go over and over and over and over again, pay attention to this, or reflect on the qualities of an object that you have attachment towards, a person or object. This will stimulate the affliction. So of course, in counteracting the afflictions, that can be helpful, but of course on top of that, we need to be thinking about the disadvantages of the afflictions, very clear in the mind, using your personal experience of how the afflictions has to be personal, how they've been a problem. How they cause problems in the life and the disadvantages in general. And the benefits of eliminating those afflictions. And then skillfully developing the antidotes. What works for you to counteract the afflictions? Each of the specific afflictions, what is the best method to reduce the affliction? So this becomes the responsibility of us as Buddhists to transform the mind. So then just in conclusion then, to dedicate, what are the positive results have been from meditating in this way? The result of, it comes from focusing the mind firstly, the first part of the session, then reflecting on the afflictions, so that we can do something to moderate the strength of affliction in our mind. in order to best benefit ourselves and others. Okay. So thank you.